We have been making some insane progress on the 240 build. It's basically a build at this point. It's not even a restoration anymore, I feel like. But with the bay being basically completed, minus the body filler, we've installed the subframe with the relocated rack, and we also mounted the suspension. But I figured this would be a good time to test fit the engine again with all the intercooler pipes and everything. Since we got it all good to go, the engine bay is good to go, we might as well verify just one last time, because it would suck to put the engine in after it's painted and realize that we needed to clear in something else. So with the build this deep, we might as well just drop it in there, especially since we have quick release core support now. It'll make it so much easier to put in. So let's hope everything fits. Let's get this engine in there. And just like that, another solo successful install. It was much easier this time around having the core support off, because I didn't have to lift it over all the way, but it's in there, fully mounted with suspension this time. Pretty cool. Got the trans mount all lined up. Now we can start test fitting the intercooler piping, make sure that works. Man, I love looking at the engine in there. So motivating. Let's take off the chain to get the full effect this time. Oh yeah, that's super sick. Ooh, so far so good. Fingers crossed that this all works. Beautiful. Ah, it's so nice to have a quick release core support. I'm happy with how it came out, although I wish I made the ends a little different, but that's the beauty of metal. You can always change it later. For now it works, so we're gonna run it. I ended up spraying weld through primer on the top of the core support for now, because these nights are getting very cold and the days are still pretty nice. So the cold to hot will definitely create some moisture in between these two metals here. So solid. All right, let's test fit this guy again. All right, got the top tightened down, but I left the bottom mounts loose just in case I need that adjustment down here. But everything is lining up perfectly, and that's really satisfying so far. Let's get the intercooler pipes, and that'll be the true determining factor if we made our holes right. Ooh, so far so good. I was really worried that that extension was not going to fit through the hole. It fit. All right, one side down. Oh, that doesn't go there. Okay. Oh yeah, look at that, perfect lineup. That's just absolutely perfect. Beautiful. So we have the intercooler pipes fully mounted now, and I want to start figuring out the air filter situation. So I have these three options right now. I have this HKS honeycomb filter that was in the crash. That's why it's all bent. I have this epoxy filter. This one bolts directly to the MAF. It's got a crack in it. This is the filter that came with my RB when I bought it. And then I have this probably HKS rep filter that was also in a crash, but not my crash. So before I can put any of these filters on, I want to put the radiator on so that we can really know our clearance over here. And before I put the radiator on, I have a clutch fan that I'm hoping will fit. This is an RB25, RB26 clutch fan. It has more blades in it, and they're also angled. I've always wanted to run a clutch fan on this car because clutch fan is superior for cooling. So I think I'm going to mount this first, you know, on the water pump here, and then take off the E-fans on the radiator and see if it'll fit. I really hope it does. Okay, moment of truth. It's already hitting the tab. All right, the radiator is literally sitting on the fan right now. It's not even all the way down. So I'm gonna say this probably is not gonna fit. Oh well. And she's in. Check out that clearance down there. It's got to be less than 5 mil of clearance. That's nuts. Yeah, it fits in there pretty good though. Alright, now we can start working on the air filter and we can choose which one we want to use. I also have this massive coupler that we can use to extend it down into the wheel well if we want to. Let's just start by putting the MAF on, because that's going to be our first piece. And that puts it out right about there. Not leaving much room for a filter. There's no way this one's going to fit in there. There's no way that's going to fit in there. So, I guess it leaves us with this tiny smashed one, which still is not going to fit nicely. So it looks like we're going to have to relocate it using this. Yeah, that could work actually. That looks so dumb. Well, at least we can maybe route it to come out around here, because right around here is where the slit is in the bumper. That could work out really nicely to just put the air filter there. Like right here. Hey, let's line it up and see. Okay. This one will probably work really well for this. MAF, extension, filter. The filter you can actually see from the little vents here in the bumper. It's got spider webs on it from sitting so long. With this being here, we just have to make sure it clears the headlights. So let's verify that real quick. So far so good. But we really got to make sure. So let's put this headlight down all the way. Oh, a little spider. Sorry I'm messing up your home, dude. Well, alright. It clears. That was a really tight fit. Since we're on the topic of test fitting things, I want to show you guys how this dash bar looked. This is the original dash bar that was on my car and was in the crash. I thought maybe just this tab here on the end was the only thing bent. Like this side still looks straight. Let me show you what it looks like when I put it on the car. So we got these holes lined up. These are the main mounting holes. It's pretty close, right? Look at how far back it is. The whole dash bar is bent to the rear, starting from this point. So this thing is completely warped. And I don't really think I want to run this one because of how bent it is. Luckily there was one local to me, so I went and scooped that up. Paid a little more than I wanted to, but it was the only one I could find, and it looks perfect, and it has the side mounts on it. And I use this dash bar as a reminder to myself of how far I've gotten with this car in just under a year, because I only started fixing the car like, what was it, mid-January or something like that, even though the crash happened in October. So yeah, I just thought that was a nice reminder, like, hey, your car's straight now. I just feel like I missed out on an entire summer of activities. I wasn't able to drive the car at all or do any drift events. Went to a couple car shows, but it's not the same when you don't have your car there, you know what I mean? And with fall here, it's just a reminder that there's only a few good days left of the year, and I'm really not looking forward to winter. So I've been thinking to myself, what could I do that would motivate me more or put me in a better mood? And I've come up with the idea to just put everything on the car and test drive it. Change some fluids and install this wiring. I am gonna redo the wiring later on, but the wiring should still be intact, where all I have to do is plug everything in and hopefully it'll still work. And with winter quickly approaching, there's gonna be no time for me to drive this thing if I don't drive it within probably the next week or two. So I'm gonna just start with finishing up little things in the engine bay, just like connecting coolant hoses. Luckily all these hoses are already figured out. All I have to do is connect everything at this point. Basically gonna just start working my way towards the rear and then finish it off with wiring. Well, at this point, the motor is basically good to go. We have all the coolant stuff connected, fuel lines connected. All we have to worry about are the heater core hoses, which I'll figure out if I want to use those or not. And the connections for the brake booster, and I don't remember what this was too. I'll have to think about that one. But before I put all this on, I want to put the steering column on first because that's all the way down here, which means I need to mount the new dash bar. Ah, it's already on there. Something I will mention is how perfectly this fit in here, and all the mounts line up so perfectly. It even has some slack. I didn't tighten it all the way, but just to show that it's not wedged in there or anything, it's like actually the right spec, which is absolutely crazy considering how many pieces this car was in. So the jigs that I made really did work. I mean, this dash bar is a really big deciding factor if the car is the correct dimension. And I nailed it. It's perfect. It's so cool. Speaking of perfect, check out this clearance here. I got that dimension absolutely perfect when I made the tubs. Like, it could not have been any better than that. That is the perfect curve there. Oh my gosh. Ugh. Steering column. I love that I left the bolts and the hardware where they need to go. So now I don't need to go searching for them. They're just right there where they need to go. Avoid having a bad day by tightening your steering column shaft. Now that we have the steering shaft and the throttle cable on, I'm going to start putting the master cylinder in here. And if you can tell, I had to notch my Greddy manifold to fit a master cylinder on here in the first place. The stock 241 didn't even work. So what I ended up doing is getting like a old Nissan pickup master and Maxima internals, and I made this shorty, and it works perfect. And I left it all attached when I took it apart, so I don't even need to bleed this. Oh man, don't tell me this won't fit. No. Oh yes, there we go. Got the hardware on the back. I think by now you guys get the point. Keeping your hardware on your stuff when you take it apart makes it a lot easier when you're putting it back together. All right, we have pedals and a steering column. I think I'm actually going to start the wiring stuff now. I'm going to start unloading everything in the trunk and trying to sort out where the wires go and determine if I want to run the heater core box. This is going to be a really fun time trying to figure out where all this goes. One big knot. This is my entire harness, the entire chassis harness. Sick. I started with just trying to spread out the wires the best I could, and I'm starting to get a good idea of where everything goes. Oh, I totally forgot that this got roached. Whew. This is one of the harnesses that I made from scratch, and when we were pulling the shock tower and the firewall when we were at Elmarks, I detached the harness that I had mounted, and then when I drove it out of Elmarks, I forgot that I detached the harness mount. So it was just sitting on the header and just completely melted everything on here. Another piece that I forgot about is the special white box that no longer has a white box around it. I'm not sure if you guys remember this video or not, but another time when we were at Elmarks, we were pulling this like 8-pillar section on the bottom, and this box was somewhere around here, and the firewall crushed it. It was like crushed inside the firewall. The firewall folded itself, and this was inside. But the crazy thing is, the car worked perfectly before I pulled it. It was crushed on the inside, but in a way where all the connections were still good, which is absolutely insane. Because as soon as I pulled the A-pillar with the frame machine, I went to start the car and none of the gauges worked, none of the accessories worked. And I was like, dang, so that was actually working before? How? how did my car run with everything just exploded? I guess it just ran on literally hopes and dreams. That's a trophy right there. Gonna frame this or something, I don't know. Before I start putting all these wires behind the dash bar, I definitely want to make sure I install the heater core box first, because then it'll be really difficult to put the heater core box on with all the wires in the way. I thought the box was a lot more damaged than I remember. So there's actually 3 boxes for the S13. There's a heater core and the blend door, and then to the left of that, there is the evaporator AC, and then to the left of that is the blower motor. So I'm missing the blower motor and the AC box. Those are just absolutely disintegrated, do not exist anymore. I'm just gonna run this for now, just so I can plug in the heater core hoses, because I don't want to loop them, because you have to do more stuff for the RB, you can't just loop it. The main thing I was looking for is to make sure that the mounts are good and that the heater core fittings are not cracked, which somehow they are not. I did have to take off the dash bar to put the box on, but figured no one wanted to see that, so there it is. This is really starting to come together now. Most of the wiring is where it should go. It doesn't look very pretty, but that's all right for now. This is not like a forever mounting. This is just to test everything out. And then once I know the car is sound and runs well, then I can really start fine-tuning mounting locations and redoing some of the main harness. Before the crash, I had begun starting to make my own harness and eliminating wires from the harness that I don't need. And then I put this mesh around it and it makes it look really clean. Just like the wires that I have in the engine bay, because everything in the engine bay is all custom at this point. So everything is in mesh and it looks really nice. But at this point, I want to start putting on the rear subframe. This should be fun. So easy. The beauty of keeping this thing on wheels. I just left it on the wheelie crate. It's working out pretty good, actually. We've got the rear subframe fully installed. Looking pretty cool. I even attached the brake lines. I'm not going to attach the hydro brake lines because I don't plan on drifting the car during this test drive. And we also were able to put in most of the wiring. It's laid out in a general area of where it's supposed to go. And now I'm going to start connecting heater core hoses. It's pretty wild that this fitting has to go all the way over here. Opposite corner. So these are the only wires that enter the engine bay, right here. I made this harness from scratch, and I pulled them all the way out just to see what we're working with here. As you can see, the burn spot is right next to the turbo, and that melted quite a few wires. So it looks like all of these wires, which are the turn signal and headlight wires for the left side. And I know it's the left side because the right side is longer. Not only that, but the MAF wire also got toast. Look at that. Oh my gosh, it's just burnt to a crisp. It's just fused into one dread, I guess. So there's a lot of different ways to connect wires together. My personal preference is solder. I find that solder is the most reliable. Now I've worked at a couple different shops and they've all had their different opinions on what to use. Some say butt connectors, some say solder. Some say the special solder within the heat shrink, which isn't a bad idea, but I personally like soldering the wire first and then putting a weatherproof heat shrink on top of it. I'll even go the extra step and put electrical tape on top of that. But either way, everyone has their own personal preference. Another reason people don't like solder is they say it'll break or it'll melt. I've never had that happen. I've soldered multiple harnesses together, and over all the years of soldering, I've never had any wires break due to solder. I don't know if they're just doing it wrong or the wrong type of solder, because there is a different type of solder used for households versus automotive. I am now confident in this connection. Now we need to make it look nice again. So I'm going to put this wrap covering it. And just like that, like nothing happened. Now I'm going to start working on the MAF wire. And this one's a little different because the MAF wire is a shielded wire. I'll show you what that looks like. Whew. And the whole reason for doing all these extra steps with the MAF harness is to prevent interference. And if you're not aware of what interference is, this is the easiest way I can explain it. Say you have your car radio on and you're just driving and you hear a whirly sound. This might not happen if you have a modern car. Basically, the RPM of the engine will match the whirly sound coming out of your speakers. Basically what happens is when there's amperage going through a wire, that creates a magnetic field. That magnetic field can transfer to another wire. So for wires as important as the MAF sensor, they do all this extra stuff so that the interference gets caught up in this wire that surrounds it instead of the actual wires within. I hope that makes sense. And there we go, just like nothing happened. So my battery is mounted in the trunk. Obviously there's no battery in there right now, but it goes over there. Still have the mounting for it. And here's my battery positive cable that I routed all the way along this side of the car, all the way here to here. So we'll hook that up and then really start figuring out what's left to do. There's really not that much left. I need to start mounting all the body parts in the front end and the headlights. That way I know how much slack I need in the engine bay for the harness, because I can just pull the rest through so it doesn't look very sloppy in there. Well, now that the front end is back together, and I left the front bumper off on purpose because I'm going to need to mount the wiring and figure out where all this goes. I need to start working on plugging everything in inside the car, which is going to be a blast. Also, I don't remember where I put my ECU, so I'm gonna have to find that. I've been making some great progress inside the car with the wiring, although I'm not too thrilled with how it looks. At least it'll be in position so we know that it'll work, and then we can make it look nice after. But I need to start thinking about a couple different things, such as the front brakes. If you guys remember, I actually gave my front brake setup to Fran for her 240 because she needed brakes, and I was like, well, we're gonna put Z brakes on it anyways, so we might as well just give it to you now. Because I had another set that was picked from a junkyard from my good friend. I didn't realize that one of the mounting bolts snapped in there. Plus I don't have the conversion lines for them or brake pads. And I think the rotors that I have for them are too big. There's 3 different types of Z calipers and they're all different sizes. I don't have my micrometer here to measure it, but just fitting this in here, like it fits snug, but it's almost too snug. Like I don't know if that's gonna rub, you know, I don't know. I don't feel comfortable putting these on the car without knowing that they're the correct specs. So instead I'm gonna run the stock brakes with the S14 front rotors because they're 5-lug. And these are actually the same brakes that came off of Fran's car. And while we're working on suspension related stuff and under the car, we're also going to throw on the drive shaft. Now I showed this detail in one of my very first repair videos. The drive shaft here was actually in contact with the trans tunnel. So when the car was smashed, the trans tunnel was warped so far in that it was sitting on the drive shaft. That's what this line is. Pretty wild. I think it's a little bit straighter now, so that won't happen again. Fingers crossed, but obviously it's a whole new trans tunnel. It'll be fine, but just crazy to think how far this car has come. You know, the trans tunnel was touching the drive shaft. That's just wild. Drive shaft is on. Brakes are on. Now we need to start working on putting fluids in the car. Since the engine hasn't been running almost a year now, I need to do an oil change because that's long overdue. This is black. Long overdue. While we're under here, we might as well connect our electric power steering lines to the rack. Everyone has a different oil preference and oil filter preference for their motors. I personally like to run this Big Johnny here. It holds like almost a quart of oil. And RBs are known to have oiling issues, so I figured I would combat that with a bigger filter. And then I run 5W40 T6 Rotella, and it's done me well, so I'm going to keep using it. And with the filter this big, it's definitely important to fill this up before installing it on the car. That'd be a long dry start. It's about time to install the shifter, but before I install the shifter, I need to fill up the transmission fluid. So we have these applesauce pouches that we're going to use. And I have already removed the fill plug on the transmission, which is right here. I find it easier just to fill it up from the shifter hole and then wait till fluid starts pouring out of the fill hole. That's how you know you have enough fluid. And I could not find a definite answer on how much fluid the RB25 transmission takes, so we are going to find out. Also, it's important that when you put transmission fluid in your 90s Nissan, you get GL4. Most stuff in the stores is GL5, and that's actually really bad for the brass synchros. So the more you know. Whoop. So I just finished filling in the 4th bag, and now it is starting to drip out. So if you like useless information, it takes about 4 quarts. All right, I think it's time to put the dash in this thing, which is right there. And it's actually crunched from the crash. Obviously the whole car was scrunched together and the dash took a lot of damage. It's not really going to be the greatest, so I am still looking for a dash if anyone knows where to find one. So I've mounted the dash loosely in the car, not bolted down at all, just in case I have to pull it back off, you know what I mean? And I figured it would be a good time to bleed brakes now, since everything else is done except for coolant, which I can just throw that in after. And it'll be easier to bleed brakes if someone has a seat to sit in. So we're gonna put the seat in. And we have a special helper to help us pump the brakes. Hey, look at you in there. Oh, we need the steering wheel still.
Who needs that?
Well, the brakes are now bled. Not that we needed to bleed the brakes to start the car, but it's nice to know that's ready to go. And now I need to prevent this from burning up all over again. So I'm probably just gonna zip tie this over here for now, but I want to make a heat shield for this so that nothing melts away again, because that would be really bad, especially while on track or just driving, or in general, just not good to have your wires catch fire. We need to put on the downpipe. And the rest of my exhaust is bent, so we're probably not going to put that on, but hey, that should be enough to get it started.
Woo!
Where is the exhaust? It's incognito, camouflaged. This thing is so bent. It's crazy that the exhaust bent right in the center. Kind of sucks, but at least the downpipe and the test pipe are okay. Probably just unbolt it here. Oh my gosh, so this is the bottom of the exhaust. The downpipe is flattened. Resonator flattened. Nothing left of that connection. And the muffler destroyed. Rest in peace, Gritty. Fun fact, this exact muffler is how I cracked my tooth. The downpipe and the test pipe are officially on. And I also went ahead and mounted up the wires in the engine bay. Pretty ugly for now, but at least we can get a good idea of what we want to make over here. The only thing left is filling up the coolant. And then I think we're ready to start it for the first time. And she's full. Gonna have to steal a battery out of a car. This one's dead. This one will do. Emergency switch. Oh man. Woo. See if the lights work. Sick. It's alive. Alright, I guess we'll crank her over. Don't forget to plug your fuel pump in. Oopsie. It was also unplugged in the back. Alright, try number 2. It's alive! Just making sure there's no leaks. Sounds so good. Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh, look at all the leaves it blew out. Everything looks good. It is running a little lean right now. Not too sure why. But I mean, it sounds great. Before it was like pegged at 10 because of the exhaust leak. But probably that high temp paint burning off. Oh yeah, clutch works. Feels really nice too. Might be a little late to be doing that. Alternator works too. Looking good. I don't know how I missed this, but it's been leaked a little bit, just a little bit of gas. So we're gonna have to look into that. That is very not good. But at least the car starts and runs very nicely. So that is a huge check mark. Now we just start making everything look nice, make some good mounts, take it all back apart later, and go from there.